hurling was a game for the gods, and gods played it.
There's so many things go on in the fastest field game in the world.
You've guys running around the field chasing a ball the size of your fist. And anything can happen.
Above all else, it's a game of skill.
It's very close to home. It's very personal.
That feel from the hurley, it runs up along the handle, into your hand, and really into your soul.
Life should be about dreams. If someone is your hero, you dream of being them.
Nobody owns hurling. Hurling just lives.
It's in your heart. You can't live without it, really. It's part of your pulse, almost.
It's our DNA. It's part of what we are.
When you look back to any sport, why do the fans travel? They want to see things out of the ordinary.
Hurling is the game that can be won and lost by an individual.
DJ Carey, the Dodger himself. After him there was Ollie Baker. DJ steadying himself, turning it in beautifully and putting it over the bar.
The gods smile on some hurlers.
Joe Canning. Oh, brilliant catch! Oh my God! Joe Canning! How did he do it?
They tend to do these kind of, wow, did you see that?
On the turn! Cracked it past Owen Murphy!
You know, that's a special moment from a special player. It's an instinctive thing that can't be coached.
Give this fella the right ball, right?
Shefflin! Henry Shefflin buries it.
He'll stick it for you. It's hard to understand these guys because they're operating on a different plane from you.
The stars keep coming, and it's the public that make the stars. Mick Mackey of Limerick, he was the big name.
You're talking about the 30s. Now, that would have been the greatest era for Limerick hurling. They were an outstanding side. But Mackey was the shining light of that particular group. Limerick played a ground hurling type of game until it came to Mackey, and Mackey would take the ball up into his hand.
Mick Mackey would have threw the ball at the end of his hurl and ran with it, and people probably looked and thought, what is this guy doing?
He really could go when he had a ball in his hurl. He really could run.
He didn't believe in going round you. If you stood in front of him, he went through you. This was what people were coming to see. They were coming to see the flamboyant Mick Mackey. Fellas cycled their bicycles from Newcastle West to Thurles which is 70 miles, to see Mackie play. Mackie was a star, and they looked up to this star. He has 3 All-Ireland medals.
There were outlier players in the past who came along and had something that was different, that hadn't been seen before. And those exceptional players contribute to the evolution of the game because people see what they're doing and they seek to copy it.
Had you ever seen anyone with solo run before?
No, really. I think the solo run happened by accident more than anything else. But I happened to break through. It was a clear field and I just took the run. But gosh, I don't know whether it added anything to the game or not.
Like it's an egg and spoon race. He's taking it forward adventurously.
In the centre is Austin Gleeson. There is an opportunity here for another hole.
In solo running, the player can only catch the ball twice.
It has to be a hardwood to start with, but it has to have a breaking point. Because if you played with a piece of mahogany or something and it didn't break, then your leg would break maybe. You know, something has to give. And that's the one thing that ice does for you.
It's a beautiful part of our hurley that it's so individual.
The only thing I was always obsessed about was getting the lightest hurley I could get possible. I hated heavy hurleys.
But I always liked a heavier hurley.
Mother Nature has a way of sorting us all out.
Well, I suppose when you come to define the sport of hurling, there are those who call it the hurl and there are those who call it the hurley.
I'm hurley, yeah.
Hurl, hurley, hurling stick.
The verb is to hurl, but the implement is a hurley.
I get very used to one hurl and I fall in love with it basically.
There was no such thing if you broke a hurl at training. You're not getting my spare hurl. You can do it that one, you're not getting mine.
And if it breaks on me, that it's unfixable. Sometimes it gets me a bit down.
You break a hurley like you die.
That hurley is an extension of you, it is you. I sometimes feel when I touch the hurley that I can almost magically remember days when I was young and feeling so at home and so much at one with where I was. That sense of belonging that the game gave me.
The first time I ever got a hurl, it was like going to, I don't know, to Disney World for the present-day child.
you'd go into this place and there was this big bandsaw inside. And this place was covered with ash and covered with ash shavings and this beautiful sweet smell.
I was 8 or 9 years of age and my father would bring me to Frank Randall and Frank would make a hurl specific, in inverted commas, to my needs.
The rule of thumb was it came to your hip bone.
And you'd be there mesmerised, watching this man put this plank of wood up on a bandsaw. God help you if your hands went near this thing would cut you in two. The bandsaw had this made a huge whirring sound and there'd be clouds of dust everywhere. And then he would start getting a spoke shave and starting to plane it. And this thing could take an hour and a half. So then he'd test the spring in it and then he'd sand it. And then he'd put his stamp on it. You know, Fippy Kenny, Hurley Maker, Bursley on either side. And he'd give it over to you. And you'd have this thing in your hand. And the first thing I would do with it is I'd smell it. So you just bring this Hurley up to your face. There's this real sweet smell of ash. And he would say the same thing to you when you go out the door. Tell your father that's the best Hurley I ever made, that'll never break.
After independence, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, Ireland was a closed society. So whatever was inherited was part of that society. Hurling cushioned life for us in a whole lot of ways. Sure, what had we on the Sunday? Only the mess and the match.
You were brought up hard, you know. There weren't that many sitting in office jobs that time. A lot of farmers and physical work and all that. It wasn't too many that went on to secondary school at that time, you know. The priest, of course, came in and he would be educated, and the doctor would be educated, and maybe the guard or whatever. But those people were looked upon as leaders and expected to lead. Generally speaking, when a new priest came into the parish, he'd be made chairman of the club. He'd be nearly automatically in. And if he wasn't chairman, he'd be president.
The simple, basic, obvious observation is that sport reflects the society in which it is played. Therefore, the society around the game of hurling was, for many decades, ostentatiously Catholic.
The Bishop of Cashel and Emily was always the patron of the GAA. They threw in the balls in all the matches in both hurling and football. Even before the All-Ireland, they always played Faith of Our Fathers, which was a hymn, really.
We had never seen All-Ireland senior hurling at that stage because Dublin was miles away. It was only the very privileged who got there.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. Welcome wherever you may be. Welcome to join us here in Croke Park, Dublin. On this...
Our first radio station came in 1926, 2RN. It was new to Ireland.
Now his Grace walks out into centre field.
And you're conscious that you're in your own front room. And at the same time, you're away.
And it was sensational.
Button's back on the loose there. Back on the loose to Seamus Hearn. Hearn up and on the far wing. Martin Todd has it now. 40 yards out. He's put it along.
When I grew up in the 1930s, neighbours, the Sheehy's, had a radio. The window would be open, plenty of space outside, all listening to the match. Nobody was allowed to speak.
So, this game that looked like one-way traffic, well, it's anybody's traffic right now.
And that's where I heard it was Micheál O'Hare.
And if anyone thought that this game was going to be dull, how wrong they were. What a
In 1938, as a young teenager, Micheál O'Hare takes over the microphone, and he essentially becomes the voice of the Irish summer for much of the rest of the 20th century.
And I wonder will he be satisfied with the point, with that line of defence in front of him at this stage of the game? I'm sure he will. Let's wait and see. He is not. It's knocked down. It's
Well, he used to be accused of making games exciting that weren't really exciting.
marching round this crowded arena here as a preliminary to the game that could well be the game of the century, yes?
You know, you had the schmozzle in the square and you had your own vision of what that meant.
You know, it's saved. They're still in the parallelogram there. There's a terrific schmozzle going on in there. Referee is currently twisted on the wall to free in the top.
The schmozzle, yes. The schmozzle in my time. If the ball landed around your legs, you were fair game. My God, there'd be just timber flying everywhere.
The advice that used to come from Croke Park to commentators, not to say anything that would worry people at all.
And again, John Keane laid the foundations for another Waterford goal.
Radio became very much, in time, the soul of the life of Ireland sport.
Well, that's all we had. Micheál O'Hare's picture, he was planting it in our minds, and we could almost see it happening.
Two Kilkenny men making the bread for the sandwich, the ham being Mick Braneley.
How would you not be passionate after living through that? And the minute the match was over, out the door, bang, sticks, hurls flying out the door and hurl till dark.
Shot, and it's the goal! It's the goal! Oh, what a game!
You have no idea, honestly, you have no idea, like, the time that I put in. But I love doing it. I have 114 audio cassettes. I have 120 DVDs, albums that would have a total of 24, 17 jerseys. I have 6 holidays. Christy was an idol. What more can I say about the man? What more?
When you speak of legend, you can equate that to Christy Ring.
Yes, they've come from far and wide, and whoever wins or whoever loses, thousands have come to see Christy Ring.
Ring was past his best when I was old enough to see him play. And so I was watching, a god in his declining years. I mean, he was a rough, tough bull of a man.
Out comes Christy Ring. He doubles on it. It's gone in and it's over the bar for a point.
But he was a hero to people who never saw him play. He was a heroic figure to people who didn't go to matches.
Ring, to me, was an image. I grew up in a shop. Somebody might come in and say, oh, Ring was in the village today, like. And I was like, oh my God, like, was he? And what was he doing?
The arrival of Christy Ring brought, I suppose, the creation of the ultimate hurling icon.
Dublin's Lord Mayor greets the players, and among the visitors are Mr. De Valera and his son, Dr. Ryan, and other ministers. In the second half, Cork literally run away with the game, and hardly a shot is mounted.
Cork followers looking for that touch of magic from the maestro. Christy Ring has gone in full forward now.
These guys were the champions for 3 years in a row.
The wizard himself, Mr. Hurling, has sent that one over for a point for Cork.
We had a very good team. It was a good all-round balanced team. Well, you can't say we hadn't stars when we had people like Christy Ring.
Christy Ring has scored a point for Cork to put them very much in the picture now. Minute and a half or so, Christy Ring has scored 4 points.
To win 3 in a row was just out of this world. Then go on to win the 4. It was just amazing, really.
Yes, it's a goal for Cork and it's scored by Christy Ring.
In third class, I was starting to read a lot about hurling in the 40s and the 50s. I was starting to, I suppose, become nearly obsessed even with Christy Ring, and the way Ring spoke about the game and the way people spoke about Ring just appealed to me.
Christy Ring was the greatest hurler of all time.
You see, he was a dancer on the field. It's hard to believe it, being a tip man, but I idolised him.
We are here to Dubliner Ferguson and Cork hero Christy Ring have one of their many clashes.
He didn't spare himself, or he didn't spare his opponent either.
And like, if you saw a Ring coming in at you, you would be nervous.
The people of Cork went to see Ring. The opposition went to see who could take him down.
I tell you, I was a great competitor. I challenged for every ball, training or either playing. I was always out to win the ball.
Well, then Christy Ring sends over another spectacular point.
I remember Cork taking the field. We were outside, and next thing, this body of a man walked out. The whole place shook.
I remember my uncle pointing out to him and saying, "There he is, there he is, there's Ringing."
Ring strutted the stage of hurling, right, and life as a colossus.
Word of mouth had stitched such a suit of armour around him that he had become like something out of the Arthurian fables, something like a knight of the Round Table, or Cuchulainn. Someone not real. And I often wonder what it must have been like for him, because he was a dogged, ordinary man. He drove a petrol truck for his living.
Excitement, well, just look.
To the people of Cork that had seen him play in his prime, right, he was a genius.
Not only saying well done to Cork, but also to Mr. Hurling himself, Christy Ring, who now has the unique record of having won 8 All-Ireland medals.
He carried Cork on his back and so often, and while you had him, you always felt you were going to win.
Hurling is, you could say, a religion here.
You go into Kilkenny now, any time today, and you'll see lads walking around with hurls. People don't know me by Jackie Turl that works for Clonbia. I'm Jackie Turl that used to hurl for Kilkenny, and that's our identity.
When you're from Kilkenny, I think any young lad growing up, if you are a reasonably decent hurler, you can at least aspire to be perhaps part of a Kilkenny All-Ireland winning team at some level. Those possibilities make young lads in Kilkenny strive all the harder.
Kieran's College was known as the hurling school. We went there first to hurl and second to get an education.
My uncles went to St. Kieran's, my brothers went to St. Kieran's. I was obviously going to go to St. Kieran's. Kieran's had the tradition, they had the history of hurling and of winning All-Irelands. I was only going there for one reason, to see where this hurling journey would go for me. Was I good enough? I didn't really know.
Men, okay. Now we have 120 men trialling for the junior panel. So what are we looking for? We're looking for every single person to do the simple things right.
For the first time ever, I was playing with lads from different counties. There was lads from Laois, from Tipperary, from Waterford, from Wexford, marking guys that you didn't really know, you didn't know which hand they struck off. Even different accents, they spoke a bit different in Waterford as they did in Wexford.
I want you to earn that jersey. Earn the place on the St. Kieran's College junior hurling team this year. We want to win a Leinster title with St. Kieran's College and go on and represent Leinster in the All-Ireland series. Out we go, so. All right, lads, the work starts now, okay?
When I was to go to secondary school, Kieran's weren't in great shape at that time, but my next door neighbour told me that there was a man who was going to be dean and that he was a great hurling man and he'd do great for the college. So we were looking forward to this man coming.
Father Tommy Marr was well known to every one of us as the trainer of the Kilkenny team.
And he was a very, very good player himself. He played for Kilkenny, went on then to the priesthood. So that cut his career very, very short, obviously.
The Irish family that sends a son to Maynooth may forever after hold up its head in the presence of its neighbours.
The clerics were banned from hurling. We wouldn't be allowed out to play for our clubs or our counties.
For there is no higher calling among the young men of Ireland.
Imagine the way at the church, the trouble we got into afterwards. The kind of things that a fella got into trouble for then were so normal and natural, but that was the way it was.
The clergy were the people who really, really helped develop the skills of the game.
They spread the gospel in the schools because there was no one getting any extra education on hurling rather than what they were learning at home in their own backyard.
Father Marr was the first to introduce routines to perfect all the skills of hurling. His view was that it had to be automatic. You had no time to think on a hurling field, so I would say that I was programmed, and when a certain ball came to me, that's what I was programmed to do.
The Leinster men were awarded a 21-yard free, which to Eddie Cahir is just an easy way to score a point.
Just pure hurling, really. He was a pure hurling man in lots of ways, and he developed many, many great players for Kilkenny.
And a lot of the routines that he developed and used are being used today.
The hand pass is something that's very, very much part of our game now, I suppose. But it wasn't always there.
I remember some comments from selectors who was watching the training saying, he's out there getting him to hand pass the ball. They were sort of laughing at this routine that he was doing, which was a new thing at the time, and showing him how to hand pass and how effective it could be when you're not able to hit the ball with your hurl.
Father Tommy Marr was hugely instrumental in this being an integral part of the game.
I learned a huge amount from him. He coached the Kilkenny team right up to the time I retired, so I owe, I could say, almost everything to that man.
The game that was played in the 50s and 60s is so different to the modern game, which is
I would say faster, more furious, less forgiving actually.
It was a different type of game, man on man, ground hurling, overhead striking.
Move that ball at speed and whipping on balls in the air. You wouldn't never see that in the game anymore. I could put on the ball in the air. I'd probably be laughed out of the trial, you know, and they'd be saying I was giving the ball away.
In the modern game, possession is everything.
Moments later, a mighty roar greets the arrival of the Tipperary team. For these Tipperary stalwarts, would this be their 16th victory in an All-Ireland hurling final?
Back into the 50s, Wexford had got to their first All-Ireland final in 51.
Here come Wexford, led by Nick Rackard and his brothers Bobby and Willie. For them,
The last time to win an Ireland final was 1910.
This wasn't supposed to happen. Like, you know, where did this crowd come from?
For them, it's a really big day, for not since 1910.
They kind of shattered the myth that this is all about the Blue Bloods, the Kilkennys, the Tipperaries, and the Corks.
The three Rackard brothers. I saw them parade around in 1951. Three brothers. There was a mystique about them.
Their leader, I suppose, Kelly, the boy from Killan, was Nicky Rackard.
He was the elder brother.
Film star, looks 6'3", big massive man, big strong man, a giant of a man, and a leader of men.
Just about everybody loved him, and we had him in County Wexford, and he was ours.
Nick Rackard and Cork's Jerry O'Riordan tussle is the case of up and over.
Nicky Rackard is, to this day, the top goal scorer in Championship hurling.
Nicky Rackard gets a ground pass, pulls hard, and the ball shakes the net.
But then he had two brothers who sent in long balls to him, and he was able to win them.
And they were the first team to develop the skill of catching the ball, protecting your hand and catching the ball in a forest of hurls.
It's primary possession. You have the ball in your hand, you can control the ball.
When catching the ball, it is important to catch it with your fingers and not in the palm of your hand, because if catching it with the palm, it tends to bounce off, and sometimes you fail to hold it.
A lot of time it comes and hits your hand and bounces out of it, and that's devastating. But when it lands in your fingers and it just stays there.
Smack, like it just hits you there, and the fingers, you think, yes, got it, like. It's primal almost in some way, you know, and you're out of there, like, you're gone, I have it, they can't get it.
So they were a team that brought a new part to the old game with the high catching.
I was 13 years old when they won the first All-Ireland, namely 1955.
And then they came to the 56th All-Ireland final.
Funny thing about today's game, that the spotlight of publicity and hero worship has been very definitely on Christy Ring and Nicky Rackard.
Christy Ring was playing with Cork, so that was a big thing to get to see Christy Ring, but not just to see Christy Ring, but to see Christy Ring and Nicky Rackard on the same day.
This is Neymar and Maradona all put together. This was about us. This was about Wexford.
Well, Ring was the greatest competitor I think I ever played against. There would be no comparison between myself and Ring as regards hurling ability. But there was a tremendous comparison between us in the determination to win.
The game is on, and the first man to break away is Christy Ring. A long shot down the field is brought down by Billy Rackard of Wexford.
Billy Rackard, he caught the first 2 or 3 balls that came his way. He had beaten Christy Ring to it.
A long high ball, way up the field.
Ring pulled very close to him and he just said to him, "That's not hurling by."
Free for Cork. Christy Ring to take it. Bending, lifting, striking. He tries a low, hard shot, and it's a goal! There's no doubt Wexford looked home and dried about 5 minutes ago, but now the matter's in the fire. That's Cork battling back now. Come up the field again. Approximately 3.5 minutes of play left. Wexford leading by 2 points. Jerry Kelly up to the Christy Ring. Ring in front of the goal is going through. He steadies himself. He takes the shot. It's blocked by Art Foley, and it's cleared out by Art Foley. I've been to me. He goes back for the ball. He hand passes
across the centre. Out comes Nicky Rackett, 21 yards out. Take a shot, he takes a shot. That's a goal! It's a goal! It's a goal, and you've never seen such excitement in all your life. Hats, coats, everything you can think of have gone into the air. And the whole of Croke Park has gone stark staring while the All-Ireland champions of 1956 are Wexford.
It's extraordinary that when they won the 56 All-Ireland final, that Nick O'Donnell and Bobby Rackard and these fellas cheered Christy Ring off the field. That is just amazing. No one's ever done it before or since. They recognised his greatness, but they also recognised Cork. They'd won everything through the 40s. You are the team, and we beat you. But you know what? We respect you greatly, and pick up your hero and carry him off the field. And you know what? I'm proud that Wexford men did that.
Christy had given such a performance on the day and had done for his whole career, and like, could only imagine what it would have been like as a fan to see a sight like that at the end of a game. A beaten All-Ireland finalist, to be sitting on the shoulders of other heroes, to be carried off a field. Amazing.
The following scenes indicate that this is not a game for the faint.
You would have often heard the joke, would you like to be down there with a hurl in your hand? The retort back was, well, I wouldn't like to be down there without one.
Any hurling match, hooks, blocks, tackles, they get the biggest cheer in a game, more than goals, because it shows honest endeavour. It takes heart and guts to put the hurley in, to chase somebody down to take the ball off them. People respect that human will and defiance. People will stand and they'll go, yeah.
The physicality element to hurling is so important. You know, the referee has a huge role in that, and we would have always encouraged to play and play on the edge.
It's not an excuse me game.
I would say it's one of the most skillful games that you could watch.
That's where this game has come from, the physicality, and it's so important.
Tip were the dominant team in the 60s. I looked at them with sort of hated admiration. Like they were that good and we couldn't beat them.
And the equally sterling Tony Wall.
There was a lot of household names. Tony Redden, Theo English at midfield, Jimmy Doyle, of course. Oh.
The ball comes out to Jimmy Doyle, and from the left touchline he shoots a brilliant point to put Tipperary 4 points in front.
I suppose in Tipperary, the full backline are very renowned. Hell's Kitchen, I suppose, Kieran Carey, Michael Maher and John Doyle. There were three very, very strong men, hugely strong.
The toughest full back line in that era, or probably any era, and the term Hell's Kitchen was used to describe them, which was pretty apt, I think.
The back's job in those days was to stop the forward from scoring, so he'd try any means.
Upper McGrath goes on a solo run into Tipperary territory, but this attack comes to naught.
Michael Maher would catch the back of your jersey, and he was a very strong grip, and he'd hold you and he'd pull up under you. Rather than hurling the ball, you'd get a thud coming up from underneath and to rattle anybody.
McMahon won one All-Ireland and he was congratulated after the All-Ireland of having had a great game. He said his hurling never touched the ball.
John Doyle was the guy, he wanted a match, he wanted a contest all the time. If he was on the biggest man or the smallest man in the field, he'd grind him into the ground if he could. He'd use his body, he'd use his strength.
They were strong guys, yeah.
You'd be playing against Ned Wheeler or some of these guys, you'd want to be strong.
You could tackle a guy off the ball that time. You could hit him a good shoulder if you thought he was going to go to the ball.
In rampant mood, Jimmy O'Brien comes dashing in. Lynch goes down.
Give him a good shot first. Now you can't do that nowadays, which is fine.
And referees were very lenient and they let things flow. So you could get killed and it wouldn't matter, the game must flow.
When I grew up, I was led to believe that this Tipperary team were absolutely raw as such and tough out.
And they also had a reputation that Kilkenny couldn't beat them, which was true.
The Tipperary hurling machine was now in top gear, and here is Sean McLaughlin to score its side's third goal.
They beat us well in '64.
Back at the canal end, Tony Nealon crosses the ball. It's Tipperary's fourth goal. Here's the fifth and final blow to Kilkenny. So Tipperary swept convincingly to their 20th All-Ireland success.
When you looked at that Tip team, right, you were saying, are we ever going to beat these fellas?
Well, here's the young man who was just carried out on the shoulders of all of his ardent admirers, John Doyle of the victorious Tip team. Congratulations, John.
Thank you, Bill.
This is the 8th All-Ireland hurling medal that you've won, and I know it must have been a real thrill for you.
It's all right, yes.
Was it a tough game?
It was a hard game, yes. Quite hard.
I mean, the defense, looked to us, really was outstanding. You and Tony Wall and Kelly back there, you had your work cut out for you.
Well, all the lads were wonderful, I think, yeah, today.
We were the first county to achieve that magic figure of the 21 All-Irelands. So we were ahead of everybody else.
A truly great day for Tipperary and for John Doyle, and of course too for the captain, Jimmy Doyle.
It's a funny thing to tell you that there's a time came in Tipperary when they got fed up with us. They were nearly hoping we'd be beaten.
For the first 80 years of the GAA, Ireland was a very closed economy, closed society. But Ireland changed completely in the 1960s from the decades before that. The 60s brought the Industrial Revolution to Ireland. It brought free education to Ireland in '67. That decade brought the television for the first time, communications.
As technology changes, the sport either goes with it or is left behind, and successful sports go with it.
I played senior hurling from 1959 to '77, and it changed dramatically during that period. Everyone knows Tipperary were the tough team at the time. So the same old thing was being thrown up, I had to be tipping All Ireland, when the chips are down, Hell's Kitchen would rough you out of it. So then Father Marr got working on the team. Father Tommy Marr knew that we weren't going to beat him on skill alone. We had to develop strong, tough hurlers as well, which he did.
And eventually, John Doyle was going for his 9th All-Ireland. And they met Tipperary in an All-Ireland final.
Downtown, things are beginning to hot up, and they're buying their colours, they're buying their hats, they're buying...
We'd need to have to match physically that Tipperary team. Blow for blow, hip to hip, whatever was there, Kilkenny weren't going to back off.
One has to go back to 1922 for the last time that Kilkenny beat Tipperary in an All-Ireland final.
And so it was inevitable when we did meet in '67 that there was going to be
mayhem.
The bubble of excitement from the crowd, and the game is on. Tipperary playing with a very strong breeze.
It was unfortunate, really, what happened in that match,
He tried to get it across. Out comes John Doyle. John Doyle shouldered by Eddie Kerr. John Doyle still with out Paul Tipperary for a foul on John Doyle. All started with his shoulder there by Eddie Kerr.
I suppose you could regard it as a disgrace now, you know. It was horrific.
Cross now into the centre to Eddie Kerr. Kerr's got it. He tackled, he shakes the tackle and sends the ball in. But no, the referee has blown his whistle for a foul tackle there by Mick Burns. And Mick, in fact, seemed to come off the worst in the tackle. Paddy Moran up the field, but Tommy Walsh of Kilkenny wasn't expecting that. And Mick Burns is shouldered and is down being attended to in the centre of the field. But Jayden Carey is shouldered off, and now it's John Doyle with the ball, trying to come up to do something dramatic about this 9th All-Ireland. And here he comes, but now he's lost his stick, he's lost the ball as well, and it's Klaus Dunn for Kilkenny with it. Klaus and John Doyle in there in the middle of it all without the stick. The covering lost cast, as it were, there for the... Oh, a hard pull there across Tom Walsh.
Eddie Kerr got a wrist broken, I think, that day now. I know he wasn't on me when he got it, but...
Eddie Kerr has gone off the Kilkenny team and Dick Blanchfield is on.
I was going for a high ball to pull on it, and someone came from behind and pulled down my arm. That's basically it. You know, in the heat of the game, like for an arm with bone sticking out, I was obviously going to go into shock or something. And I remember Dr. Cuddy said, "I know you're a pioneer," he said, "but I'm prescribing this for you." And he took out a bottle of brandy out of his pocket and gave me a swig of brandy. And just then, one of the selectors came to say Tom Welsh is after getting injured.
Just within 50 yards of the Tipperary goal. Paddy Moran to take it. Lowish one.
Tom Welsh lost his eye that day.
Tom Walsh has gone off the Kilkenny side and has been replaced.
I don't believe that the player that struck Tom intended to take out his eye, but that's the way it happened. It was a blow to the face. There was no headgear that time, no helmets.
Tom Walsh is going off the field. He was in the wars there, gone off injured.
It did finish his career, which did look like being a great career.
I think it brought a little bit of realization back to the people. No, this isn't acceptable.
And the game is over, and Kilkenny are the champions.
And it was sort of the watershed. We did beat Tipperary, but there was a heavy price to pay for that.
Yes, after 45 years of waiting, Kilkenny have defeated Tipperary.
Well, everything changes, I suppose, you know, and times moved on, and the education was fairly free now at this stage in Ireland. Everyone was educated, everyone knew what was going on.
And down here in front of us, something very unusual, a colour camera, a colour television camera.
Television now was showing up what was happening on the field, and that's not a bad thing.
You get a heightened sense of how skillful this game is, you know, what some of the great scores were, what some of the great tackles were.
3 Kilkenny men, 4, make it 5, and the 5th is Pat Henderson.
And I think it certainly has helped a huge way to cleaning the game up.
And a nice ball. Dennis Ball and Foley in the ball, down the ball. There it is, and it's in the ball. Here it is again. There it goes in.
Fellas had to improve their skills to be able to stay with the game.
Oh, a lovely cut, a lovely shot, a delightful point by Tom Cashman.
Hurling had to move on with the times, and it did move on. The game deserves that.
Just about to win.
Hurling is always dictated by the winners. There's nothing for the losers. The winner takes all.
You had a kind of a revolution in the 90s.
It was professional, but in an amateur setting.
Thank God we were in an era where we saw the greatest hurler of them all.
Kilkenny developed this real power game against which every team will be judged.
Tommy